The most decisive carrier battle of the Pacific War wasn't won by carriers. It was won weeks earlier in a basement beneath Pearl Harbor, where 50 analysts attacked Japan's naval code by hand. By mid-May 1942, Commander Joseph Rochefort's Station Hypo had broken roughly 40% of JN-25 traffic, enough to glimpse an attack Japan believed no one could predict. Turning those fragments into an ambush required something even riskier. Japan entered June 1942 with every conventional advantage. 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, formed the core of the first mobile force, each one fully operational, each with decks crowded by veteran pilots and ground crews who had not tasted defeat at sea. Their combined air group numbered 229 aircraft, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and fighters, all proven in the sweep across the Pacific. The supporting task force included heavy and light cruisers, 19 destroyers, and supply ships that could keep the armada fueled and armed for weeks. The Japanese fleet moved under the command of Vice Admiral Chichi Nagumo, backed by the confidence of a string of victories from Pearl Harbor to the Indian Ocean. Their scouting planes ranged hundreds of miles, and their intelligence officers believed American resistance had been broken at Coral Sea. In contrast, the U.S. Navy carrier strength was crippled. Only 3 carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and a battered Yorktown, could be sent to sea. Yorktown had just limped back to Pearl Harbor with a buckled flight deck and torpedo damage, patched in 72 hours by crews who worked around the clock. American air groups were outnumbered and short on combat experience. The Pacific map showed Japanese bases encircling Midway, and the nearest U.S. reinforcements were thousands of miles away. If the battle unfolded by the numbers, the outcome was predetermined. No reasonable assessment of force strength or geography suggested an American victory. The calculus of ships, planes, and pilots pointed only one way. Under these conditions, the only variable left was information, something the Japanese believed was entirely under their control. The decisive variable in the Pacific was not steel or aviation fuel, but the quiet labor of 50 analysts in the basement of Pearl Harbor's 14th Naval District headquarters. Station Hypo, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, worked in a space smaller than a bowling alley, surrounded by cigarette smoke, code books, and the constant hum of typewriters. Their enemy was JN-25, the Imperial Japanese Navy's main operational cipher, a system built from 5-digit code groups, each super-enciphered with a secret additive. The scale was daunting, over 33,000 possible code groups, with new additive tables swapped in at irregular intervals. By mid-May 1942, Hypo's ledger showed that roughly 40% of intercepted traffic could be rendered readable, but the reality behind that number was more fragile. Each message required the team to hypothesize likely phrases, so-called cribs, and then work backwards, subtracting candidate additives by hand, column by column, hoping for a match. Progress came in bursts, a repeated phrase, a recycled additive, a slip in Japanese radio discipline. The decrypts were partial, often ambiguous, and every day the codebook shifted just enough to threaten weeks of work. The labor was split among 3 rotating crews, with Rochefort himself sleeping on a cot in the corner, refusing to leave the room. Analysts like John Higgins and Carl Murray logged each breakthrough in notebooks later archived at the National Archives. The basement's output was raw intelligence, not certainty, and every conclusion was shadowed by institutional rivalry. Washington's OP-20G, the Navy's primary code-breaking office, doubted Hypo's readings, arguing that the target, codenamed AF, could just as easily mean the Aleutians as Midway. The skepticism was not just academic. Without definitive proof, command would not risk the fleet. In this climate, the work of Rochefort's team was the only equalizer against a Japanese force that otherwise held every advantage. A plain text transmission leaves Midway on June 2nd, 1942 at 9:15 Hawaiian Standard Time. The message is unremarkable by design, a routine alert about a critical shortage of fresh water, urgent but not panicked, sent in clear English on the standard Morse frequency. The garrison's radio operator repeats the message for emphasis, following standard Navy protocol for logistical emergencies. There is no cipher, no encryption, just the expectation that Japanese signals intelligence will intercept and process the traffic as part of their daily monitoring. Within hours, Japanese collection stations on the home islands and at forward bases logged the broadcast. Their analysts, trained to recognize American-based procedures, flagged the water shortage detail and forwarded up the chain. By June 3rd at 4:45 Japan Standard Time, the combined fleet's daily summary notes receipt of a message from AF reporting a severe water shortage. The term AF appears in the encrypted JN25 traffic, embedded within a string of 5-digit code groups. Back in Pearl Harbor, Station Hypo intercepts and logs the Japanese reply. The decrypt ledger for June 4th, 2:35 Japan Standard Time records the decisive phrase, AF short of water. The entry is cross-referenced against the original Midway broadcast. The interval between the American probe and the Japanese acknowledgement is less than 48 hours. The causal link is direct, one plain text ruse, one encrypted confirmation. The Codebreakers notebooks, still held in the National Archives, show the timestamps and intercept numbers in sequence. For the analysts in Hypo's basement, this is not theory or speculation. It is proof. The Japanese operational planners have accepted the bait. AF is Midway. The intelligence is actionable, immediate, and by the logic of the intercepts, beyond reasonable doubt. The next step is not further analysis, but the redeployment of the fleet. The mechanics of the ruse, the speed of the Japanese response, and the precision of the intercept logs remove ambiguity from the decision. The battle's outcome, in effect, is decided not on the flight decks, but in the margins of a decrypted message. Orders move without ceremony. On June 3rd, Admiral Joseph Nimitz issues his directive. Task Force 16, Enterprise and Hornet will steam northeast of Midway, their position set by decrypted JN25 traffic and a single Japanese phrase about water. Yorktown, battered but restored in 3 days, joins them. There is no consensus in Washington. OP-20G, the Navy's code-breaking office in the capital, still argues the target could be the Aleutians. Nimitz discards their caution. He accepts Rochefort's analysis from Station Hypo, treating the water shortage intercept as proof. The gamble is absolute. 3 American carriers are committed to a patch of ocean 320 nautical miles northwest of Midway, a location chosen not by scouting or reconnaissance, but by the logic of a decrypted message. The deployment geometry is precise. Enterprise and Hornet form the backbone of Task Force 16, positioned to strike from the north. Yorktown, under Rear Admiral Fletcher, approaches from the east. The carriers maintain strict radio silence, their movements governed by Operation Plan 2942, which now references AF as Midway by name. The plan's language is direct. All forces are to intercept the enemy task force identified by the code designation AF. Japanese planners, convinced by their own intelligence estimates, expect American carriers to be at least a day's sail from the atoll. Their main force proceeds along a southern approach, unaware that Nimitz's carriers already occupy the intercept point. The American ships are invisible on the open sea, their presence masked by the same operational secrecy that made the water shortage ruse possible. The trap is set not by chance, but by a chain of decrypted numbers and a commander's willingness to trust analysis over doctrine. The stage is now fixed for a confrontation that, on paper, should not favor the United States. But the geometry of the ambush belongs to the Codebreakers. At 10:22 a.m. on June 4th, the American dive bombers found their target not by luck or superior scouting, but by following coordinates derived from decrypted JN25 traffic. 3 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, were caught in a state of maximum vulnerability. Their decks were crowded with bomb-laden aircraft, fueled and armed for a second wave against Midway. The Kido Butai action log and ordnance charts show racks stacked with 250-kilogram high-explosive and armor-piercing bombs, fuel lines running, and deck crews preparing for launch. In this 6-minute interval, American bombs ignited the volatile mix, triggering fires that swept through hangars and magazines. The rapid destruction was not a function of pilot skill or carrier maneuver, it was the direct result of timing. The strike force arrived at the precise moment when the Japanese were least able to defend or recover. The geometry of the ambush, down to the minute, was set not by chance, but by the intelligence that placed American carriers in position before the enemy even knew they were there. Hiryu, the last of Nagumo's carriers, stayed afloat into the evening of June 4th. After launching a final, desperate strike, she was located and hit by American aircraft just before dusk. Fires swept through her hangars. By dawn on June 5th, Hiryu's crew abandoned ship. She slipped beneath the waves shortly after sunrise. The loss was not measured in steel alone. Japanese casualty sheets list over 2,000 dead across the 4 carriers: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. Of these, around 1,150 were trained aircrew, the core of Japan's naval aviation experience. The rest were deckhands, engineers, and support staff. In a single day, the Imperial Navy lost more carrier-qualified aviators than it could hope to replace for the rest of the war. The immediate cost, recorded in the ledgers and casualty reports, was the effective destruction of Japan's frontline carrier force and the men who made it operational. Intelligence victories are silent. One careless headline nearly erased months of cryptanalytic labor, proof that strategic advantage can vanish with a single leak. Today, information security remains the first and last line of defense. In war, as in peace, the quietest rooms decide the loudest outcomes.